Dhanurgrahitva Upanishadam Mahastram Sharam Upasanashita Sanjayita Ayamya Tad Bhavakatena Chetasa Laksham Tave Evaksharam Somya Vidhi Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Taking as bow that mighty weapon furnished by the Upanishads and other sacred scriptures of Mother India, fasten to it the arrow of mind, made sharpened by thoughts on reality alone. Then taking aim and pulling full strength, O student, release and penetrate the mark, the imperishable Brahman. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us, sustain us, and illumine our thinking consciousness. Free us from impediments and obstacles, and reveal to us the essence of the scriptures. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So with this sloka out of the Upanishads, we indeed go towards the Upanishads. In this case, our fourth class on the Paingala Upanishad, might say named after the student this time rather than the teacher. In the case of Paingala, who's going to Yajnavalkya, the famous rishi, a very realized soul of endless fame and depth and profound wisdom, going to him and asking him about the art of aloneness or isolation. That is also mentioned again in the final chapter, which we're studying today, chapter and a half. We took in the first 2.5 chapters with 2 new charts that I created for this Upanishad to aid everyone in understanding some of its esoteric nature and some of the more convoluted teachings, like the folding of the cloth of consciousness, which is the very first chart. I'm going to just flash these first 2 charts before I go on with the class so that we can remember what we did. So in chapter 1, you remember that phrase came out where Yajnavalkya was answering the question. He went to the answer of what's the art or the state of aloneness that the soul comes to when they strip everything off, all the coverings off the gift, as we say, or renounce everything that's in the way, approach that state of emptiness, sometimes it's called, or also coming up on fullness, getting the non-essential out of the way and the essential in view, separating the wheat from the chaff. There's so many ways to say it in different ways of speaking. And what Yajnavalkya immediately jumped into was not some description on Brahman, which is hardly possible anyway. You can point towards Brahman, but really can't reveal it without direct experience. So instead, he went into this display of tattvas that you get in Samkhya Yoga and you get in Shaivism in terms of 24 and 36. We even studied an Upanishad recently that had 96 tattvas listed in it, and I created a chart on that for us. But then Yajnavalkya is kind of going more of the way of Vedanta Samkhya, if you want to call it that. He's got his own way of talking about tattvas. And so we looked at that, and you can see it on that chart really quickly. It's all the folds in this awareness he talks about. He says, in there, all the burgeoning worlds exist in all of these tattvas, starting out with unmanifested nature, where all the seeds are stored. That's like similar to your deep sleep state, where everything is stored in there for dreaming and waking, as the Advaitas tell us. Then going down to the Mahat, the great mind, where everything begins to become concretized, at least in terms of intelligence turning to thought. But if you want thought to turn to energy and then energy to turn to matter, you would step out further to the cosmic egg that Lord Brahma of the Trinity, which is synonymous with the Mahat, would project into the insentient seeds in the great mind so that they'd waken up and start producing, just like you would water and give sun to the plants all around you in your garden. And the great garden like that, the Mahat, the great garden of the great mind, and this also has to happen in a very deep region of consciousness, the deepest and purest region of consciousness where the Trinity exists, the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, as we call it. And then coming out of that, then you would find the subtle root elements, that those ideas in the mind that form forms in dreaming. So in a sense, we're going to look at waking, dreaming, and deep sleep later today. So in a sense, you're coming out from an unmanifested state, which is like deep sleep. And of course, we're talking in this case about cosmic consciousness, not just collective and individual consciousness. You're coming out, then you're coming out more into a state of manifestation where thought begins to have its way, informed by intelligence, because at that deep level, intelligence is the first compound of consciousness, to quote Vivekananda. Second compound might be will. But of course, unless you're talking about the Shakti, the Divine Mother, her will supreme. Coming further out, then you would get these ideas that are sort of like the formation of heaven, in a sense. That is, here it's put in Yajnavalkya's words, from ether, air, from air, fire, from fire, water, from water, earth. He's not really talking yet about the solidified 5 elements yet. Those are out here in the gross waking state and furthest from the source. And they're gross vibrating objects, basically, which will be taken back in dream to their tanmatras, they're called, then taken back to deep sleep, where they're just seeds again, waiting to be watered again by the will of Lord Brahma, so that they'll come out into another cycle. So I've said this before, maybe not with such sparsity of words, but that's kind of the evolution, involution in a spiritual sense. In physics and Western thinking, evolution has to do with real modification. But in East, as we learned in our seminar last weekend, it has to do with unreal superimposition manifesting itself in various ways. So whatever the case, whatever way they think, everything that goes out must come back in. Everything that leaves the source must return to the source, just like sun rays return to the sun when the horizon blots them out. So in that way, you're coming out to that state, another fold in consciousness, if you're looking at it the way Yajnavalkya is trying to explain it to Paingala in this Upanishad. So he doesn't start off sparing the poor man, this poor young student. That's why I just chanted, take aim, full strength, pull that arrow that you've sharpened with thoughts of Brahman, and then, point it toward the target of Brahman and release, full strength and release, penetrate that mark. So he's not sparing him this mental effort, intelligent effort that it's going to take to penetrate the mark, which is to pretty much see all of this as happening in the mind, and then reverse the process and go back beyond the mind. And this will then include the collective mind of all souls, billions and billions of them, in these various burgeoning worlds he's talking about. And then it will also come down into individual minds like we have in our individual bodies, billions and billions here on earth too. And let's speak of our ancestors in a realm where tanmatras are showing themselves more than the actual elements that come out of the tanmatras. When it comes out of the tanmatras, it's called the state of the jiva. That's the human condition, is another way I put it. There's a kind of a negative slur on that whenever people use it. Oh, that's the human condition. It means I've got these limitations. I've got these 5 senses that see only outwardly. I've got these hands that want to grasp selfishly. I've got these feet that want to take me everywhere, but they don't ever take me back to Brahman. I've got this energy with which I eat and enjoy, but I can't turn off this energy and store it up so it can take me inward, so that I can see all of this, so that I can return to my source every day in meditation, for instance. So all of that is the human conditions. At the state of the jiva, we thought that's where the worlds have solidified. And seven higher and seven lower, they're called lokas and patalas. And then you see here the quote that we had there, which had to do with uh, when Brahman quintuplicated everything. Yajnavalkya says in this Upanishad, when he quintuplicated it all, then man at the far end of it began to feel like I can't move, I'm suffocating, I can't vibrate, I can't express myself. So it's like he said, oh, I better penetrate the crown chakra and come down to these lower chakras that people are existing at, the three lower chakras, Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, they're called. So the Lord comes down through the Sahasrara into the Agya, into uh, the throat chakra, and Vishuddha it's called, and then into the heart chakra. It penetrates down into the state of the jiva and lights him up so that now he's feeling like I can breathe, I can move, I can pulsate, I can do good deeds, and I can return to heaven or beyond heaven now that I have the light of the Lord with me. So it's very beautiful explique that Yajnavalkya tells Paingala in a private moment between the two that somehow got recorded into one of these 108 Upanishads that we're looking at. And that's how we started off. So I probably did my duty by uh, explaining that in just a few minutes. Let's then look where we went from there. Don't forget that we had the five senses, the five pranas, and the five elements and everything come out in the state of the jiva. So explains where our senses, their objects, the five gross elements, air, earth, fire, water, and ether, and the five pranas that are carrying energy down these centers or back into these centers, where they are located in the whole picture that Yajnavalkya is giving to his blessed student. The next week, or a week and a half later, we went to the second chapter and read that. And since my study of it produced this uh, this Upanishad, and this chart on the Upanishad, we never really finished it completely, but it's just put together everything from earth came, all of these things. Skull, skin, flesh, bones, intestines, nails. From water came blood, urine, saliva, perspiration, gastric fluids, etc. From fire comes hunger, thirst, heat, lassitude, sexual union, etc. From air comes activity, transporting, breathing, motion, uh, tilling and reaping. That's what two of the words I didn't put in there, but that was in the Upanishad because people toiled back then, throwing things around, heavy bags of crops, and they tilled the soil. Most people were doing that. So Yajnavalkya put that in the Upanishad, sort of a sign of the times that they were working the earth. And then the five tanratas, there they are, from ether to air, from air to fire, from wire to water, water to earth, are right there in the subtle elements. They're called. And then, so that all got put in the um, gross body. The subtle body, which is a mental body, had all of those pranas, organs of action, the organs themselves, like the inner organ of the mind and higher mind, and the sense of cognition, which is basically my eyes see, my ears hear, my tongue taste, my hands feel. These are the active organs, or sometimes they're called organs of senses of knowledge. And then the tanmatras mentioned again. So basically, we put this in between these two hands of projection. Call them divine mothers, call them Lord Brahmas, whatever you want. Basically, then we put there and superposed over them the koshas. You see it, they're there. The four koshas there and one more kosha there cover the whole gamut of the gross, subtle, and causal body. So you have your physical kosha, which is over here, Annamaya kosha. Then you have Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya kosha here, which is kosha's coverings, means 2, 3, and 4. And then here in this causal body, which is sort of like your deep sleep state, you have the Anandamaya kosha. That's the kosha of, you might say, the ego that's enjoying bliss, but it's enjoying it still short of consciousness. It doesn't really know that it's Brahman yet. It's still holding on to a slight sheath of separation. Sometimes we refer to that as the ego. And when it's given, the ego is given to the Lord as an offering, it becomes a very ripe or mature ego, as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Dev told us. Basically, then it's the pakva hamkara instead of the apakva. It's ripe, not unripe. So that Anandamaya kosha can be ripened by adoration of the Lord. And at that point, Yajnavalkya breaks at the end of chapter 2 into part of chapter 3 and tells Paingala, at the end of many lives of good deeds, because look at what he's just related, all these folds of consciousness with all these billions of beings coming into worlds, taking on bodies, and going back to their source or close to it, or to heaven, because heaven's not the source, and then coming back out again in another excursion, in another sojourn, in another lifetime to express itself more and more, trying to fulfill these desires for objects and for pleasures and avoid pain, as Father of Yoga tells us. Attraction and aversion is the two great obstacles, two of the 5 great obstacles there, according to him, Patanjali. So, resorting to a fine teacher and serving him well, they inquire into bondage and liberation. That's a very pivotal medium point between the 2 chapters of this Upanishad. Yajnavalkya is kind of taking a pause from this very long-winded and must have been rather mentally exhausting explique of how many tattvas there are in the folds of consciousness, and all of the principles and everything in them, and then on top of that, categorize them into 3 bodies, and 5 sheaths. So you've got my own rendering of how to put these together. You've got 3 bodies, but they spread themselves out over 5 sheaths. And now we're going to go to finish the class, we will soon go to the 3 states of consciousness, which are waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. That's the next thing he brings up. So again, these 2 charts covered chapters 1 and 2 and part of 3, and that's where we ended up with in our Sunday class a week before last. It takes an extra week here to tell this. And so now what we come to is chapter 3, and I want to pick it up right here where he's talking about these deep 3 states of consciousness. We should start in the middle of chapter 3 where we left off. Get my papers here together to read to you. Chapter 3 starts out with Paingala asking Yajnavalkya to talk about what the great sayings in the scriptures say. So I could have brought the 4 Mahavakyas chart, but we've gone through that quite a bit. Basically, Tattvamasi, Ayamatma Brahma, Pragyanam Brahma, and Tattvamasi, and Aham Brahmasmi. Those are the 4 Mahavakyas that are culled out of the Upanishads like this. The 180 Upanishads, they occur throughout those. And Paingala wants an explication of those. So he starts into it by saying, "Thou art that. I am Brahman. One should meditate on this. The expressed sense of the word tat, which means that, pointing to Brahman actually, is the cause of all the worlds, marked by mediacy rather than immediacy. Having being, consciousness, and bliss as characteristics, Maya is his adjunct, and omniscience as well are his features. The very same with awareness mixed with the inner senses. The object of I notion comes and is expressed in the meaning of twam. So he's taking apart tat, twam, asi. So first he explains tat as Brahman, with Maya as his adjunct, and Satchidananda as his complete characteristics. Then he explains twam, the second word of that three-word Mahavakya. In that way, I notion mixed with senses. And then when God rejects the supreme, uh, rejects the adjuncts of the Supreme Lord, then as Jiva, Maya, and avidya, the indicated sense of Tatvamasi becomes Brahman, non-different from the inner self. So Tatvamasi means that thou art. So when consciousness is focused on Brahman alone, then all of those adjuncts are dissolved. But as soon as it leaves that and becomes identified with adjuncts, then it becomes adjuncts. That's why the folds of consciousness are important. Yajnavalkya started out talking about those, so he could see how he could explain Yajnavalkya's question. Remember the question in the second chapter? The question in the first was, what's the state of aloneness? The question that started out the second Upanishad had to do with how did Brahman become the jiva, if you remember. So now he's in the third answering this question about how did the great souls come to the conclusion that they're one with Brahman. You might as well be saying that. It's not putting it exactly that way, but that's the gist of it. And so Yajnavalkya takes just 3 slokas to tell him that. And then in the fourth, he says, the fourth sloka of chapter 3, hearing is investigation into the import of propositions like that thou art, and I am Brahman. Reflection is the exclusive dwelling on the content of what has been heard. Meditation is the fixing the mind one-pointedly on reality, made doubtless through investigation, reflection, and reflection. Concentration, resembling a flame in a windless spot, is the thought, whose content is solely the object meditated upon, exclusive of the agent, with the act of meditation. So he's going through the 3 great proofs here. And he's about to get into then the 3 states of consciousness. So in this way, then he's talking about the exclusive dwelling upon the content of what has been heard. So first you hear it, shruti, and then he says the mind then becomes like a candle in a windless play. We chanted that, was it yesterday morning or when we were meditating at the shrine? Yata dipo nivatasto nengate sopamasprita. Yogino yatachitasya yunjata yogam atmanaha, Krishna says in the Gita. Like a candle in a windless place, its flame unflickering, the mind of the yogi concentrates upon that would mean Brahman, that thou art, right? He concentrates on that and then meditating upon the Atman deep within and steeped in union, yoga, yogam atmanaha, the yoga of the Atman, Krishna says in the Gita. So that's what is said here very richly in just 3 slokas. And that's why I brought this chart along to glance at, because that's how we have taken apart the 3 great proofs of truth, sometimes also called the 3 powerful practices. And so this really brings into perspective the need for the aspirant, like Paingala, he's probably already done this and is doing it still, uh, how to do the mental practice of Vedanta. In a world that's so physically oriented, then people might head more towards Hatha yoga, uh, in terms of substitute for mental practice. They really feel body oriented. They really feel like they have to twist and turn. They get into different positions and somehow are figuring that this is going to give them enlightenment or make them spiritual. And it does neither. So it doesn't occur to them that the mind is the projector of the body, and the mind also holds all the diseases that got into the body, as Lord Vashishta tells us, and the mind holds all of the desires to engage in attachment of the senses with the objects. It's all the mind. So then the practice should be done in the mind, the seers say, the Vedantic seers. So they give you the way of doing that. And like I say, Paingala probably already has this teaching given to him long ago, but Yajnavalkya is giving him the full read of everything here. And so he's really talking about then hearing is investigation into the import of propositions like that thou art, or I am Brahman. So that's first one, Shravana. And then reflection is the exclusive dwelling on the content of what has been heard. That's manana. So that means the mind wants to take what it just heard from the scriptures and from the guru, basically, and go away into a quiet place, a lamp, right, or a candle in a windowless place, and it wants to just become completely vibrationless, vrittyless. It's probably done a lot of other practices in yoga, in other limbs of yoga, to get itself in the position where it can shut off everything else but just what it heard from the guru and just what it read in the scriptures. That's manana. And then he says that in just 2 sentences. Then he says meditation is the fixing the mind one pointedly on reality once this manana has been accomplished. 1, 2, 3 punch puts Maya to the mat, we used to say. Poof, slap, hit, Maya falls. And there's the reality of Brahman coming forward. When you sharpened your mind and pointed it at the target and released and penetrated the mark, you penetrated through Maya. And this was a part of your mental, intellectual, psychological, philosophical practice that left the body and senses out. And it got to the goal quickly that way without being divested of those heavy weights that he already talked about back here and here in terms of the gross and the subtle body both, particularly the gross body. So that's the first 4 slokas of chapter 3. Let's look at this really quick then to flesh it out. So Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana are the 3 words. In Shravana, to hear the truth, hear it from an illumined preceptor. That's grounded in the tradition. I'm not going to expand upon these. I'm just going to state them as being absolutely necessary and very Vedantic in their nature. You don't question these, you do them. Hear it with intelligence intact and heart open. So you want to, doesn't shut bhakti out of the gate or out of the picture. You have your heart open and then you engage the mind. That's called beta kendra, intelligence, illumined by the love of the heart and the heart illumined by intelligence. So keep them both. And then hear this truth that you've just heard from the traditions to know its outer meaning and its inner meaning. So basically, its outer meaning, we're learning some of that in school, in Western education. But hearing the inner meaning, that doesn't really always occur. That's why people were going around in the 60s and groups came out singing pop songs. And so all of a sudden you hear some people in school, do you hear what they say in those lyrics? So everyone's like saying, wow, what did they say? Love's the only way. So they're hearing some of these messages in early 60s and 70s pop songs, and they wanted to know the inner meaning of things, not just the sound and the outer. So even then, people are starting to get interested in the fact that there was an inner meaning to things, to words, and they wanted to hear them. It didn't go very far as the popular trends go. But when you got to a guru and you found a path and you read the scriptures, those words, those gave you a definite inclination to seek an inner meaning. But it was a subtle meaning that was beyond what you were hearing in school, in your educational systems. It was a spiritual education people were looking for. So that's explaining this idea of outer and inner meaning. You want to know them both. Hear it for the purposes of enlightenment, rather than say making a living or becoming famous or getting rich. I mean, all these other things get mixed in, and spirituality goes by the wayside, and people give it up. They just become popular and famous and so forth. So you want to hear these truths from the teacher, from the acharya, from the preceptor, from the guru, from the luminary, from the rishi, from the sage, from the seer, from the Swami, from the Rinpoche, from the Roshi. You want to hear these truths coming from those scriptures for the express purpose of getting enlightened. That's why you've pointed the arrow at the target and you're not looking at other targets. Oh, there goes a duck, you see. Just keep it pointed at the target. Hear it with a view to inform others about it, and hear it to destroy ignorance for all time. Those are the best of Shravana that I could think of when I sat down and did my uh, samyama on this particular thing. Hearing, see, those six stood out to me in my mind. That's what you want to hear the truth under that auspice. Those six things. Okay, now we've heard, right, Shravana, and we know how Shravana works. Now let's go to Manana. We want to contemplate it. So you've heard it, you go away, candle in the window's place, so forth, so on. Riti's gone. You're just concentrating on those words, those truths that you heard, and you sit quietly and you reflect on them in your mind. Not much different than forms disappearing in meditation. See, people say, oh, I keep hearing sounds, or I keep seeing sights, and that's just your subtle body, like heaven, calling to you and interfering and influencing you when keeping you away from the fact that you're trying to see through all the overlays of cosmic projection and all the sheaths and all the coverings and all the bodies and all the worlds, uh, both heavens and hells. See through them all. So this is trying to get in the way to waylay you, and you don't allow it. You just focus on that, and you do that to contemplate the truth, subject to the testimony of the seers. If you get confused, you go back. When we heard our first echo of non-duality from Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, at the Vedanta Society of Portland when I was in my early 20s, and I heard it for 10 more years and kept going back to him to hear it again and again because I pretty much understood the scriptures, and I didn't have any problem with Jnanam in my particular case. But the non-duality was something I'd never heard before in this lifetime. So I made sure I went back and heard it again because it was intriguing. It was something different, something beyond, something abstract, something esoteric, something that was beyond the obvious, even to a Jnani. So basically, that's what's meant here. Go back again and hear that testimony from the seers because they've had the direct experience of it, and they can actually transmit it to you if you stay close to them. If you're far away and don't hear it, then it's not going to occur to you. Also, this truth you've heard measured against what the scriptures declare. So testimony of the gurus, teachers, and the scriptures both, right? So human body first, Nutan Manas, Eshete Nutan Manas. A new man has come into the body. A beautiful song in India. And uh, Manushatvam, it's called. Get a human birth, then get a good teacher, uh, and then hear the truth and meditate on it and realize it. And that truth is going to be contained where? In the scriptures and in the words of the teacher. Discuss it daily with your spiritual preceptor. Who's doing that? We're reading about two of the greatest, Paingala and Yajnavalkya, doing that exact thing daily. Or like Ram and Vashishta doing it when Ram was just a teenager, just again and again meeting every day, just to discuss all this, not the affairs of that were going on in a king's court, because Ram also had to live amidst that, not what's happening in some distant forest with a bunch of demons attacking ashrams, which he killed later. None of those things were going on day to day. Vashishta and Ram got together to enact that ancient guru-shishya relationship that discussed Brahman every day, because everywhere else they went, palace, marketplace, forest, wherever, it wasn't being talked about. Does it sound familiar? Because that's your condition here in the West when you were born this lifetime. Nobody was talking about it. Nobody knew about it. So this is an extremely important point to manana. Measure it against what the scriptures declare. Discuss it daily with your preceptor. Refine it with ongoing worship and meditation. Here's where the four yogas begin to come into view and be coalesced, right? Because we talked already about the intelligence of the mind and the love of the heart. So you want to then put it into worship of the body, of the form of God, and meditate upon it all. That's four yogas right there. Then perceive it as the internal voice of the Vak Devi. That's a far cry for most people, to hear the voice of the goddess and to say to yourself, oh, I heard it from the scriptures, that was great. I heard it from my teacher, that was better. Whose voice is that now? I'm hearing it from the Devi herself. See, the goddess has come and told me this wisdom inside, and it's beginning to look like non-duality to me. It's beginning to get closer to the source. So you might say, in terms of hearing, Shravanas, you realize in the Manana phase that there were three kinds of hearing in Shravana. And that was your Guru's voice, the scriptures, and the Devis, the goddess of wisdom. So this is Manana related. Nididhyasana, as we take apart 3-4, that is chapter 3, sloka 4 of the Paingala Upanisad, consists of this: refine consciousness and raise it to higher centers of awareness. Confirm all results with ongoing spiritual practice. You keep up the practice, the sadhana. Transform life in the world and the body in the light of this truth. That's where you want to bring it back full circle. There's another fourth thing down here that you can't see on the invisible part of this chart. I can see it right there. See, it's written across there, Satchakara. You bring all of this back into life, full circle. I mean, you started it off in life, didn't you? You said you heard about a teacher, you went to a teacher, you heard the teacher, you took it into your mind, you thought about it, you realized it. Is that all there is? No, it said, share this truth with others. So now you have to come back out full circle. And so that's the 4 proofs of truth, or the fourth is actually the action you take to utilize the 3 truths properly. Be open to non-dual truth in stages of successive samadhi. So we have to know that this process is going to change you. It's going to transform you. Your mind is getting a makeover, not just your face, some beauty salon, but your mind is now getting the makeover in the beauty salon of Atma Brahma. You're going to have this complete transformation of mind go on, and you have to be ready for it to say, that sounds like one of those samadhis that Lord Patanjali talks about in the Yoga Sutras that are seated. Maybe I'm having one of those. See? Also be open to the suggestion of non-duality, because that's not going to act like a samadhi. That's going to all of a sudden take you by surprise. You're all going to have a great realization that all of a sudden that in the wilderness, like Jesus and Buddha or Muhammad, I and my Father are one. It's like kind of come upon you in the most amazing way. It could have been a thought you had before, and then you kind of, ego said, nah, don't listen to that. That's garbage. That's not true. How can you be one with Brahman? How can you be God? But it'll come upon you in such a way that it transforms the mind to think that way. And that's the beauty of non-duality. So here in the nidijasana phase of the three proofs of truth, this is important. Also, realize the identity of the apparent self with the Atman. So when I looked at this and wanted to have a backdrop on the ocean of Om there, I called it hear, see, and be. Hear, see, be. It's a nice little, if you put it all into one word, it's a nice English mantra. Hear, see, be in three mantras. So basically to hear it is Shravana, to see it is Manana, see it inside of yourself, and then to be it is Nidijasana. There's a couple quotes there that we could end this chart with. Shankara says, there is no other means for the control of mental states except knowledge of the self and the train of remembrance about it. So come to know it and then remember it. When you remember it, Smriti, Rupena Samstita, remember that it's the mother's own wisdom. Yadevi, Sarvabhuteshu, Chaitaneti Abhidhyate. You want to remember that and you want to bring it with you at the time of passing from the body and at the time of return to the next body. That's a Jivan Mukta who does that. Actually, a Jivan Mukta does it while he's living. Then he becomes a Videha Mukta, and then he comes back again as a Jivan Mukta. So that is Shankara's way of saying it. Nidijasana is not a means to liberation, he continues. Knowledge of the self must already be present for Nidijasana to occur. So you're going to have that as an idea planted in your mind by your guru in a previous lifetime in order to even be interested in non-duality when it comes to you. Otherwise, it's kind of, like I say, a shock. And there's been so much water under the bridge in terms of conventional religion, parental upbringing, and priestcraft, and a whole slew of things, not what to speak of your worldly karmas, that have been in the way of you having heard a thought like that. That's how important Shravana is. If I hang around them long enough, these seers, then I will hear something that's very intriguing and it will change me. So I must be in proximity with them. We call that sadhu satsanga, holy company. So a lot of us out of the 60s and 70s went looking for swamis, roshis, rinpoches, and so forth as they became available to us. Final quote here. Retrieving the sense of hearing from the cacophony of common talk and verbiage, turning the two eyes inwards towards a singular sight and rescuing the mind from the throng of endless and pointless worldly activity are the requisites for the threefold powerful practice that transforms one's being and ushers it into the ocean-like depths of breathless peace, purest understanding, and non-dual awareness. So you have to rescue the mind and senses from what I was just talking about. Conventional religion, family upbringing, ancestors, and their attachment to the world and heaven, and military and violence, and all these things that you've been experiencing as you came into this body in this particular Burloka, one of those lokas here that's on our first chart that Yajnavalkya told us about. I'm going to retrieve my mind and senses back from that. I think I'll even retrieve my body back from that and make it walk the path of truth. So that's what's called the three proofs of truth in India. Shravana, to hear, manana, reflect on it without interruption and without aggravation or distraction, and then realize it. Hopefully then we can bring it back. So that's what is said here by the great Rishi. He goes on then, as we finish up this Upanishad, then the mind's modification, though shooting up, remain uncognized. They are only inferred but from memory. By this samadhi alone are dissolved thousands of deeds accumulated in the course of beginningless transmigratory existence. Well, that's really, a mouthful, basically. First, it tells us that transmigratory existence is going on and on without any beginnings, middles, and ends. And it tells all the bodies that you've taken have engaged in thousands, crores is the word here, thousands and thousands of activities that have created this karma, which is bringing you back again to this world into another body. And then it also is saying that once Tattvamasi, or I am Brahman, is realized through hearing, through hear CB, then basically all of these doubts that are coming up become uncognizable. They don't attract your attention anymore. They shoot up, but they're only inferred from a memory of this past existences that you don't even know about sometimes. Um, the best knowers of yoga call this kind of concentration Dharma Mega. So you know that Patanjali talked about the occult powers, 8 of them, and then there's this eightfold power qualities, attributes of Dharma Mega Samadhi. If you reach a place inside of you where you'll eschew and reject the occult powers like fame, money, wealth, popularity, all those kinds of things, and you decide, get thee behind me to those are devilish, then I'm going to go toward the Dharma Mega Samadhi. The best knowers of yoga are doing that. When the meshes of latent impressions are entirely obliterated by the virtues in Dharma Mega Samadhi, and the accumulations of deeds, both good and evil, pulled up by the roots, the proposition earlier mediated on, generates unimpeded and immediate realization. It resembles, as they say, a gooseberry in the palm of your hand. That's the fruit in the palm of your hand. You can see yourself now without clouding everything in front of it. Oh, there I am. You can see inside now your true nature. When this happens, one becomes Jivanmukta. One becomes liberated in life. That's all of that was chapter 3, 5, sloka 5. What a sloka. Chapter 3, sloka 6. Then, he says, takes a big breath, a little pause, maybe they have a sip of some chai. See, and then he says, God desired non-quintuplication of the quintuplicated elements. We might as well, shall we go back, or we can just take it up here? He decided that all these fivefold things that were projected in the folds of consciousness, by Lord Brahma and other powers, the gods and goddesses, he decided that all of that needed to be unquintuplicated. Especially when a few people started getting Jivan Mukta, right? They saw through the game. I might as well just draw it back. And he wants to count on his 2 hands. If God has hands, how many souls got free in that particular yuga? Then he's going to withdraw everything back and bring everyone back to their source. So leading the affected macrocosm and the worlds included in it back to their causal state, unifying the subtle organs of action, unifying the vital breaths, unifying the organs of cognition and the fourfold inner mind, reducing all elemental effects to a fivefold cause, the elements to the tanmatras. The Lord dissolved in due order the earth in water, water in fire, fire in air, air in ether, ether back to the ego, and the ego back to the great ego, the Mahat. The Mahat is the unmanifested, and the unmanifested in the spirit is called Purusha. So you're back to your true nature, even beyond unmanifested Prakriti, because you're not a sentient, you're not an insentient thing, like a seed for a tree, or like a thought in the mind. You are consciousness. So you're getting drawn back to that realization. That's Asampragata Samadhi, that's Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that's Satori and Zen, and so forth. That was 3.6. 3.7, having become non-quintuplicated through the attenuation of everything that has accumulated, including deeds and ripening of good deeds, the one with the subtle body still returns to the cause and effect, the gross body, generated by deeds done through the quintuplicated gross elements, it all becomes non-quintuplicated and dissolves into the immutable inner self. That's Atman. It's like Shankara chanting, in the Vivekachudamani, so Mano na buddhi shariram indriyam tanmatram bhutani na buddha panchakam. All of those are listed here. And he draws them all back to the ego, and then the ego into the self, and then the self into Brahman. So this is all what's being called here non-quintuplication. So we've taught this for a long time as almost as if it were a secret to most people, because it is. Everything comes out in fives. You've got five senses, you have five fingers, you have five toes. There's so many ways that you can look about and see fives. Even the Star of David has 5 points, they say. So everything here comes out in quintuplication, in order, but Yajnavalkya is saying he reverses the order and brings them back in reverse order. So it's not random, like, oh, I'll put this here and then take that there, and confusing it all. It's got perfect order to everything. And that order manifests itself here, even in chaos. That is, in insentient things. There's an order that everything has to follow. That's the voice of the Devi. Everyone will obey her. Her will is supreme. And so everything is going to get dequintuplicated. And here he says, the microcosm gets consumed in the fire of yoga. Together with its causes, they all get dissolved in the Supreme Self. Therefore, the Brahmana, that's the one who's concentrating on Brahman, should concentrate and dwell upon the identity of the contents in terms of tat and tvam. Tat, tvam, that, thou, asi, are. Now you have the last vestiges of two-ness, you might say, are there. When the clouds are dispelled, the clouds of the mind are dispelled, as when the sun shines forth, the self is then manifested as the single reality. Meditating on the self of the size of a thumb in the central of the heart, like a smokeless flame, meditate on the illuminating self in the center, immutable and immortal. The silent sage, who is Jivanmukta, liberated in this life, sits meditating till sleep, sits meditating till death, and is the blessed one who has performed all his duties. I mean, he doesn't let up. It just gets better and better and better. And it gets better because of divesting everything that one took on. And even better than that, knowing that you're the one that did the taking and you're the one that's doing the giving up. The self is all in all. It all gets dissolved back into the self. Giving up status of liberation in life, when one's body gets consumed, that one reaches the status of disembodied liberation, like the wind becoming stirless. Like the wind just decided, I'm not going to blow anymore. It's like the mind decided, I'm not going to think anymore. So just like that, everything ceases. Cease and be still. That's what Divine Mother Durga will do on the battlefield. Cease and be still. Enough battle. I'm going to silence everything. And everything melts away and stops. Stops in its tracks. That sloka puts together the little riddle about Jivan Mukta to Videha Mukta. That the Jivan Mukta holds that state once it attains it until, meditates till sleep, meditates till death. And then when sleep and death are gone, it turns into a Videha Mukta. And the wind stops blowing, all the pranas stop. No more, the memories all get burnt out. And it becomes one with Brahman. I and my Father are one. That immortal, certain being, devoid of sound, touch, form, taste, or smell, without beginning and end, who is even beyond the Mahat, he's gone beyond not only heaven, but he's gone beyond the cosmic mind that produced heaven, alone remains without impurity and suffering. To him belongs peace and to none else. Katha Upanishad says. End of chapter 3. Let's push on. Chapter 4 is short. Okay, might call this the Upanishad of 4 questions, right? Because each section starts with Paingala asking a question, all very profound questions. And Yajnavalkya masterfully answers them and doesn't skimp on the words. Then chapter 4:1, Paingala asks Yajnavalkya next. I'm surprised he can even form words after hearing that, but he said, how does a knower, a jnani, act? How does he stay in repose? It's funny that Arjuna asked this to Krishna, and I mean, it's been asked by every seeker who all of a sudden sees the divinity nestling in the great sage or seer. And, as if to say, like, well, how did you become that way? I have to believe you. It's like second generation of swamis, of Sri Ramakrishna's devotees came up and said, wow, you're so fortunate because you saw Sri Ramakrishna. And the direct disciples, those who were left at the time, turned to them and said, actually, you're the most fortunate ones because we had to believe. You never saw him, but you still believe in him. So that's kind of what's being communicated here too. So how does he act? How does he stay in repose? Yajnavalkya replied, one seeking liberation, having acquired freedom from egotism, takes 21 generations of his ancestors across the sea of samsara. The knower of Brahman himself alone takes 101 generations of ancestors back to their source. So know the self to be the rider in the chariot, the body verily to be the chariot, the intellect to be the charioteer, and the mind to be the reins. The senses, the wise say, are the horses. The objects are what they range over. The hearts in them are the moving, many-storied mansions. The great sages aver that the self combined with the sense organs and the mind is the experiencer. Therefore, in the heart, immediately is Narayan well established. God and man, Narayan, the Lord, established in the midst of all of this. It's an old chart, one of the first ones I ever put together, and just want to flash it because it gives you a quick idea of what Yajnavalkya just said with a little bit extra emphasis on it. So basically, you see there, it's a study of about 1 minute. This is in the Footfalls of the Indian Rishis. You can see it if you have that book. And I hope that it's up there on your screen. There you see what Yajnavalkya just said. I mean, look furthest out. Furthest out you can go in the quintuplication processes: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Actually, in that order, you're going back in. So start with ether first. Ether, air, fire, water, and earth came out in that order. And he's said twice in this Upanishad already, and it was in the first chant, that if you reverse the process, these go back into each other. It's always been very wonderful to think about that, because in ether, you have 5 elements, and 4 of them all go back into ether, right? When you look on ether, you find out it has 5 ethers in Indian philosophy. Akashas are called. Bhutakasha is a space of objects. Pranakasha is a space of energy. Ether, an ether of energy. And Manomaya Kosha, Manakasha is a space of thought or mind. And Vijnana, Vijnanakasha or Jnanakasha, it's called, is a space of intelligence. And then spirit, there's a space of spirit too. So basically, that's 5 different ethers that we need to account for in the quintuplication process. So you'll never find it unless you can Fold these up like cloths. Fold these up like wrinkles in the sky. Fold everything back into ether. Ether then is a great um, liberator. It's a great catapult that lends the soul impetus to go beyond the five elements. But since these other four take the foreground of most people's thinking, and they never think about Earth, well, take us for instance in the West, four elements. Ether's not even included in some renderings of the elements because it doesn't exist. So the non-existence of a thing to India proves that it exists, or proves that God is most subtle and can't be seen through these. But if you include ether in your fourfold process, because you're jipping the quintuplication process, and one of the gods getting very upset about that, you include the god of ether back into it, all of a sudden the whole thing is evolutionary and involutionary both, that you can move in both directions, just like you do from waking to dreaming to deep sleep and back. You're always moving every 24 hours through your gross body into your subtle body, into your causal body, back to your dreaming body, back to your waking body. And those are called the three states of consciousness. Well, that's the five great elements out here. And Yajnavalkya say they're all connected to the five senses of knowledge. They connect directly, actually. Smelling, earth, tasting, water, seeing, fire, feeling, air, hearing, ether. They're straight across the board. You might as well be stepping from the growth into the subtle, just like in these two charts we looked at, if you make those connections. If you don't make those connections, these all stay random and separate. You can look at them one at a time, but you'll never get the connections that are part of yoga in the quintuplication process. You'll never understand that there's an involution of everything back to a source. Case in point, even our most intelligent people in the West do not know about involution, nor the great principles that everything gets involved back into. It's not just I die and go to heaven. Even religion doesn't know that, but it goes in order of quintuplication process back to a source. Well, there's the five pranas, which are here, for the second chart that we looked at. So there's the five pranas. They also connect back into the mind, and the mind. Yajnavalkya and Krishna both are saying those are likened to the reins of a mind. Know the self to be the rider in the chariot, the bodily to be the chariot, the intellect to be the charioteer, and the mind to be the reins. So here he's calling the mind the reins, but I'm calling the intermediaries the pranas connected to the mind. And there's the self with the ego and intelligence on either side of it, riding along with the mind, and it's all connected to the Purusha. And all around it is avyaktam. Remember that word, avyaktam? It's the very start of this out called unmanifested prakriti. It's all avyaktam. That's the question that Paingala asks of Yajnavalkya. What is this avyaktam? Avyaktam is, and then he says everything from seeds out. And here you have the five tanmatras: audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and fragrance. And there you have the five pranas, one prana in five forms, basically is what it said there. Yeah, I wanted to show that because it's brought up here. And Yajnavalkya often, obviously thought that it was important to put that in the teaching here early in chapter 5. So that was the first 5 slokas of chapter 4. Chapter 4, sloka 6 says, up until the exhaustion of operative deeds, and that's called your karma that's on you right now, the homeless, liberated self behaves like the slough of a snake, like the moon in the sky. So those two behave, the slough's left behind, the moon changes from new moon, which is Thursday on Guru Purnima this week, changes to no moon in about 15 days. So basically you see this moon changing in the sky is what he's using two examples there. That's to describe the homeless self. Homeless gets a very high level of assessment here, doesn't it? The have thou no home, as Vivekananda said in his beautiful song. Have thou no home? What home can hold you, friend? The sky thy roof, the grass thy bed, food what chance may bring. Well cooked or ill, judge not, he says. So might as well be talking about the sky of awareness. All right, so 7, shedding the body in a holy spot or giving it up in the home of the eater of dog's flesh. The liberated one attains isolation. So no matter where he gives up the body, doesn't matter to him. He's free from the body. Afterwards, making an offering of his body to the cardinal points, or burying his body, or burning his body, mendicancy is prescribed in that way. So basically, the body becomes immaterial because it was always so material before. So it's kind of a funny pun. No observance of the period of pollution, no burning of the corpse, no offering of rice balls, no offering of holy water, no fortnightly rites are laid down for that one who has become Brahman. There is no burning of what is already consumed, just as there is no cooking of what is already cooked and eaten. For one whose body is consumed, the fire of knowledge, the fire of yoga, there is neither ceremonial rice offering nor any other rite or obsequies. Beautiful conclusion. He's heading us up to the end here. That is telling Paingala these beautiful things. As long as the adjuncts of the body persist, let one wait upon the teacher. Let him treat the wife of the teacher and the children as he does the teacher himself. So he's seeing the same in all beings. When with the knowledge of I am that dawns, whose mind is pure essence, is pure spirit, is long-suffering, wisdom is finally won. When the object of knowledge, the supreme self is seen, is established in the heart, when the body is dissolved in the state of achieved peace, then one becomes destitute of the luminous mind and intellect. This is describing no mind in Vedanta, which it came pretty much pronounced in Buddhism. So he divests himself even of this shining, radiant mind and the luminous intellect. Very beautiful that all those drop away in order to merge oneself in Brahman like a hailstone in an ocean. For of what use is sacred water to one who has had his fill of nectar? Similarly, for one who has known the self, of what use are the Vedas? No duty remains for the yogin, who has had his fill of ambrosia, of knowledge. If duty be there, he is no knower of truth. Though stationed at a distance, he is not distant. Though embodied, he is disembodied. He is the omnipresent inner self. These are the nuggets in the Upanishads that are of pure non-duality. So you'd have to go to them because the Upanishads have mention of duality. They use qualified non-dualism a lot. They don't really, they pull out all stops in the Upanishads to try and explain to souls. But here is where you're getting the real nuggets. Precisely why I didn't create a third chart to go with chapters 3 and 4, because Yajnavalkya is just letting out everything now. He's explained the grounds, and he's set the student up for hearing this non-dual truth, and now he's just letting it out, wisdom nugget after wisdom nugget, to the joy of Paingala sitting there. Making the heart pure, contemplating the well-being of all, one must experience supreme joy in the thought, I am the supreme, the all. As there is non-difference when water is poured into water, milk into milk, ghee into ghee, so is the case with the individual self and the supreme self when the jivan is poured into Brahman. When the body is burnt by knowledge and knowledge becomes infinite, then the knower consumes the bondage of karma in the fire of Brahman. Thence follows the state of holy non-duality or reality, named the Supreme Lord, likened to the stainless sky. Self's nature, abiding without adjuncts, is as that of water mixed with water. Like the ether, the self, in the subtle body, the inner self, like air, is not perceived. That stirless inner self perceives the external manifold with the torch of objective knowledge only. So he'll take on objective knowledge when he wants to see the quintuplication process again and the beings who are in it. For that kind of illumined soul, in order to extract some of them out, would be the ultimate. One other possibility there is to enjoy the play, lila, sportive play. We saw Sri Ramakrishna doing that, doing both of those, helping souls out of the suffering that came from relativity or the play of consciousness in form, at the same time sporting without form, without attachment to his body. On top of that, entering non-dual states where he became like that candle in a windless place. The knower who is dead to matter, due to whatever form death has taken, is dissolved in Brahman like the all-pervasive sky. This dissolution he knows in truth as the pot space in infinite space. And that's Gatam. Basically, you've got a pot in the space in the pot. You've got all the space outside. He breaks that pot. The space inside the pot becomes the space outside. Only that pot of the body-mind mechanism was causing an apparent difference between the two kinds of air or space in the pot. That's a very famous non-dual teaching, to realize the oneness of all consciousness, but also realize that adjuncts can come and appear to make the one, two, or many. When he knows this, he attains the self-sustained light of all, pervasive knowledge, standing on one foot. If a man does austerities for 1,000 years that way, that austerity is less than 1/16th of this yoga of meditation. So the best of all austerities isn't these physical austerities that are done by hatha yogis and so forth. The best austerity is this oneness with Brahman austerity that is infinitely more of benefit than any other austerity that can be done. That's done here in mind intelligence. And further, Paingala, this knowledge is to be known. One wishes to know all that. Were he to live even for 1,000 years, he could not reach the end of the wisdom of the Shastras. So this wisdom can be, as we saw with Sri Ramakrishna, just extended infinitely and talked about with millions of people on end throughout time. What should be known is just the imperishable. But life is fleeting. Avoiding the labyrinths of the Shastras, meditate on the truth alone. We go beyond that wisdom. Action is endless. Purification, chanting the holy names, sacrifices, pilgrimage to holy places, these are valid only till truth is won. So all these austerities have even a higher thing than just standing in a cold water on one leg for 1,000 years. There's a higher level of austerity that has to do with chanting the holy names and pilgrimage and so forth. Those are useful next, but not when the truth is won. Then those things do not have to be practiced anymore. And as regards to the great souled ones, the sure cause of liberation is the knowledge I am Brahman. The two words determining bondage and liberation are mine and not mine. The import of mine binds the living being. He is liberated by not mine. When the mind is dementalized, no longer is duality cognized. So mine comes with duality, not mine comes with non-duality. It's just a matter of course and fact. So he's making his teachings more concise, more sharpened, like that error, and penetrating deep into Paingala's final reserves of any kind of vestige of misunderstanding that might still be there. Thus, everywhere is Brahman well established. For one who holds, I am not Brahman, no liberation is possible. It is as if futile, like striking the sky with clenched fists, or a hungry man's chewing the chaff, he says. So he's looking down his nose quite despicably at people who say that try and say that they're liberated when they're denying the existence of Brahman. Whoso studies the Upanishad as a rule every day is purified by fire, by air, by sun, by Vishnu, and by Rudra. He has bathed in all sacred waters. He is versed in all the Vedas, has performed all the sacred rites taught in the Vedas. He has ritually muttered lakhs of itihasas, written down many Puranas, and 1,00,000 times of Rudra's tantras. So all of these scriptures have come out of that one, and he's done this through many cycles of times and births, and then drawn them all back into himself. It all comes out from that Atman, returns to that Atman. He has also muttered 1,000,000 times the sacred syllable Om. He redeems 10 generations of his line, past and future. He purifies the rows of diners of which he is a number. He becomes great. He is purged of the sins of Brahman, slaughter, drink, stealth, adultery, and all the association with those who are guilty of these. So even he brushes up against people who are unholy, like Vivekananda coming here to the West and having so many experiences. It's not pure, it does not ruin his purity at all. The supreme status of Vishnu spread out like an eye in the sky, and from that the enlightened ones always behold Brahman. The wise, ever vigilant and diligent in practice, richly glorify the supreme status of that supreme being. Last sloka says, Om, truth. This is the secret teaching. And ends with Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That Brahman is infinite. This universe is also infinite. The infinite proceeds from the infinite. Then, taking the infinite of the infinite, it remains as the infinite Brahman. Om. Therefore, let peace be in us. Let there be peace in our environment. Let there be peace in the forces that act upon us. Here ends the Paingala Upanisad, belonging to the Sukla-Yajur Veda. Om, peace, peace, peace. So, as I said, no chart for the third and fourth chapters. Not that I always do charts for every chapter of an Upanishad, but that just needed to be read. That was like what Paingala heard after he got these two teachings about involution and evolution, what's being evolved, what's getting devolved, and also all of the beautiful teachings that Yajnavalkya shared with him from his own experience. So you have a combination of the scriptures there with Yajnavalkya's own precious spiritual experiences put together, echoing like great couplings like I was saying, Lord Vashishta and Sri Ram when he was a teenager. So these great souls with the teachings then become very important for us to study, even hundreds, thousands of years after they've been written down, as is the case with the Upanishads. So here we will end with a chant. Ya Devi Sarvacheshu Chaitanyati Abhidhyate Namastasyai 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 Namo Namah Swadharma Shreshtitam Sagarvam Shamstatam Jananam Drishtata Tvayaiva Bhajyaho Swadharmo Vaidikam Hyagargo Darshitam Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali Om. The eternal verities contained within the Vedic religion and the Upanishads were revealed and explained lucidly by you, O great teacher. This humbled the pride of those who erroneously proclaimed their own creed to be superior to others. By silencing these assumptions, you have opened up all minds to truth and drawn attention to a truly universal faith. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our humble salutations. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.